At my own birthday party, my son said loudly, "We're taking a family photo without you, Mom." Everyone laughed as I stood there alone. I smiled, stayed quiet, and left early. The next morning, my son knocked on my door frantically, but when he saw what I'd already done, his face went white. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The last candle flickered on the cake, a single, stubborn flame in the soft twilight of my own backyard. I felt a swell of pure, uncomplicated joy, the kind that is rare and precious after so many years. My son was home, his wife Chloe beside him, and a handful of my oldest friends were gathered around the patio table, their faces warm in the glow of the string lights I had hung myself. I wore the new burgundy blouse I had bought for the occasion, a small luxury that felt like a promise. For that one suspended moment, everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for, was contained in that circle of light. I inhaled, ready to make a wish, my eyes finding Marcus. That was when he clapped his hands together, a sharp, commanding sound. "All right, everyone," he called out, his voice carrying the easy, practiced tone of someone used to directing things. "Before Mom blows out the candle, let's get a proper family photo. Chloe, get your phone. The light is perfect right now." My wish dissolved, unformed, but the smile stayed on my face. A photo was a good idea, a memory of my 45th birthday. I adjusted my blouse, feeling a fresh thread of happiness. He was thinking of preserving the moment. Chloe stood, tapping her screen. "Okay, everyone squeeze in behind Vivian, get close." My friends shuffled behind my chair, their hands resting on my shoulders. I could feel their affection through their touch. Marcus came around the table and stood just behind my right shoulder, leaning in. I could smell his cologne, something crisp and modern that always seemed a bit unfamiliar on him. "Ready?" Chloe called, holding the phone aloft. I tilted my head, my smile feeling natural again, my eyes crinkling. This was it. This was the picture. Wait, Marcus said, holding up a finger. He straightened up and took a step back, then another, until he was standing beside Chloe. He put his arm around her waist. "Actually, let's do this right. A real family photo, just us." He looked directly at me, his expression one of cheerful logistics. "We're taking a family photo without you, Mom. You can be the photographer this time. Hop up for a sec." The words did not make immediate sense. They hung in the air, a bizarre grammatical equation that refused to solve itself. Family photo. Without you, Mom. Hands on my shoulders tightened, then fell away. The circle of warmth at my back vanished, leaving the evening air cool against my skin. I did not move from my seat at the head of the table, the cake with its single candle still smoking slightly in front of me. I watched, as if from a great distance, as my friends, looking uncomfortable but compliant, moved out of the frame. They murmured things, little laughs that were meant to smooth over the moment. "Oh, Marcus," one of them said, but it was a whisper. Chloe giggled, a nervous, tinkling sound. She lowered the phone. "Marcus, that's silly. It's your mom's birthday." "It's fine, it'll be funny," he said, his voice booming with assurance. He beckoned to the now empty space behind me. "Come on, everyone, get behind us. We'll get one with Mom in a second. This one's for us. Our first family portrait as a married couple, right, babe?" And they did it. They all moved. They arranged themselves behind my son and his wife, who were now centered where I had been sitting. They formed a new tableau, a complete picture that required my absence. I was the empty chair, the vacant space at the table, the photographer. My body moved before my mind could command it. I stood up, the wooden legs of my chair scraping loudly against the patio stones. The sound was harsh, a protest. I walked the 3 steps to where Chloe stood, my movements precise and mechanical. I held out my hand. She placed the phone in my palm, her eyes flicking to mine for a fraction of a second before darting away, a faint blush on her cheeks. I raised the phone. The screen showed them all, a group of people I loved, smiling awkwardly. My son's smile was wide and unburdened. It was a joke to him, a bit of fun. I tapped the white circle on the screen. The shutter clicked silently. "Great," Marcus said, breaking the pose. "Okay, Mom, get back in, your turn." I handed the phone back to Chloe. "I think I'm done with photos for tonight," I said. My voice was calm, a flat sheet of ice over a deep, dark well. It did not sound like my voice. I walked back to the table. I did not sit in my chair. Instead, I picked up the cake knife and smoothly cut a slice, placing it on a paper plate. I did not look at anyone. The chatter started up again, forced and loud, a wave rushing to fill the silence I had created. I heard the scrape of chairs as people returned to the table. I passed the plate to my friend Ruth. "Here you go," I said. "Vivian, are you okay?" she whispered, her brow furrowed. "I'm perfectly fine," I said, and I cut another slice. The frosting, a buttercream I had spent an hour making that afternoon, felt greasy on the knife. I served everyone, including Marcus and Chloe. I served myself last. I sat down and took a bite. It tasted of nothing. It was just sweet, cold paste. The party continued for another hour. I laughed when a joke was made. I nodded at stories. I refilled drinks. I was the hostess. I performed every function required of me. But inside, a fundamental switch had been flipped. The joy was not just gone, it was erased as if it had never been there at all. In its place was a profound, echoing silence and a single, clear observation. I had just witnessed my own erasure, and it had been met with laughter. When the cake was reduced to crumbs and the wine bottles were empty, I began to clear the table. Marcus came up beside me, stacking plates. "Great party, Mom. Thanks for doing all this." "You're welcome," I said, not piling the plates into his hands as I usually would. "Hey, listen," he said, his tone dropping to a confiding murmur. "The car," making a weird noise again, that grinding sound. "Think you could take a look at it tomorrow morning? I have that big client call at 9 and I can't be late." I looked at him then, really looked at him. His face was open, expectant. There was not a shred of guilt, no shadow of understanding about what he had set in motion. He needed a mechanic. He needed his mom. "I have plans tomorrow morning," I said, turning to carry the plates into the kitchen. "You'll have to call a garage." I left him standing there. I finished cleaning my kitchen, methodically washing each glass by hand, wiping down every surface until it shone. My friends hugged me goodbye, their embraces lasting a beat too long, their eyes full of unasked questions. I smiled and thanked them for coming. Finally, the house was quiet. I stood in the dark living room, looking out at the backyard. The string lights were still on, illuminating the empty chairs, the crumpled napkins, the ghost of the party. The plastic chair I had been sitting in, the one they had asked me to vacate, was just a shape in the gloom. I did not cry. I felt a strange, cold clarity. The woman in the burgundy blouse, the one who had wished for a simple moment of belonging, had been publicly dismissed. That woman was gone. What remained was something quieter, harder, and far more determined. The celebration was over. The consequences, I knew with a stone-cold certainty that settled in my bones, were just beginning. And they would not be my tears. They would be his problem to solve. I turned off the porch light and went upstairs to pack. The packing did not take long. I had always been a practical woman, and sentimentality had rarely guided my purchases. I filled one large suitcase with clothes suitable for a season of independence, my toiletries, and a small box of essential documents. The rest could wait, or be let go entirely. I did not sleep. I sat in the armchair by my bedroom window and watched the night sky lighten from black to deep blue to a pale, cool gray. The silence of the house was different now. It was not an absence of sound, but the presence of a decision. At 7:30, I made a pot of chamomile tea. I carried it to the kitchen table, the suitcase positioned neatly by the back door, my purse and car keys on the counter beside it. The morning sun streamed in, highlighting the dust motes in the air, illuminating the quiet order I had maintained for so many years. I took a sip of tea. It was hot and mild. The frantic knocking started at 8:15. It was not the familiar, quick tap Marcus used, but a persistent, pounding rhythm that spoke of panic. I did not get up. I took another slow sip from my cup. Mom, open up, it's an emergency." His voice was muffled but sharp through the door. I finished my tea, placed the cup in the sink, and then walked to the front door. I unlocked it and opened it, but I did not step back to let him in. I stood in the doorway, filling the space. Marcus looked disheveled. His hair was uncombed and his shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were wide, his breathing slightly quick. "Thank God. My car completely died at the end of the driveway. I think it's the alternator. I told you it was making that noise. I have to be across town in 45 minutes for this call. I need your car. Now. He tried to peer around me, his body already angled to move past. Where are your keys? I did not move. My car is not available. He blinked, his hand pausing in midair. What? Mom, come on, this is serious. This client is huge. I can't be late, just give me the keys. I'll get it back to you tonight. I said it is not available. My voice was level, devoid of the warmth that usually softened my words for him. You should call a tow truck, and then a rideshare. His confusion shifted into irritation. A rideshare? Do you know how much that will cost from here? And the time? This is ridiculous. Just move, I'll get them myself. He put a hand on the door frame, a gesture that had always signaled his childish insistence, one I had always eventually yielded to. This time, I did not yield. I looked at his hand on my house, then back at his face. You will not enter my house, Marcus. He froze. His eyes finally focused on me, truly saw me. They traveled from my calm, composed face, down to my traveling clothes, and then over my shoulder, landing on the suitcase by the kitchen door. His expression shifted through layers, confusion, dawning comprehension, and then a flicker of disbelief. What is that? Are you going somewhere? Yes. Where, when? Why didn't you say anything? The questions tumbled out, his client call momentarily forgotten. The details are not your concern, I said. A flush crept up his neck. Not my concern. Mom, what is going on? Is this about last night? Are you seriously still upset about that? It was a joke, a dumb joke. Everyone knew that. I said nothing. I simply held his gaze, letting the silence between us expand until it filled the entire porch. He deflated a little under it, his tone becoming more pleading. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry if it hurt your feelings. It was just a photo. We were going to take one with you right after. You know that. Do I asked. The question was simple, clean. He stared at me. Of course you do. Don't be like this. It's my big day. I need your help. There it was, the core of it. His need. It had always been the ultimate currency, the one bill I had always paid without question. My help, my time, my car, my silence. His emergency was the only emergency that mattered. Your transportation problem is not my emergency, I stated. You are a grown man with a salary and a credit card. You will solve it. He took a step back, as if physically pushed. The panic from his car trouble was now entirely replaced by a different, more profound alarm. He was looking at a stranger. Mom, what are you doing? Where are you going? Away. For how long? Indefinitely. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind visibly scrambling. This is crazy. You can't just leave. This is your house. We have plans. Dinner next week. Cancel them. I took a small step back into the house. I have to finish my preparations. You should call that tow truck. Goodbye, Marcus. Wait, he said, his voice rising. You can't just shut me out. This is an overreaction. It was one stupid comment. I paused, my hand on the door. I looked at him, my son, standing on the porch he had run across as a boy, now a man bewildered by the first real boundary he had ever encountered from me. You told me in front of my friends on my birthday to get out of the family picture, I said, each word measured and clear. You defined your family as one that excludes me. I am simply accepting your definition. Now you need to go and solve your own problem. I closed the door. The solid, familiar sound of the bolt sliding into place was louder than any shout. I did not lock it. The act of closing it was enough. I stood in the foyer and listened. I heard his footsteps, hesitant at first, then moving away across the porch. A moment later, I heard the sharp, angry sound of his fist hitting the hood of his dead car, followed by a muffled curse. Then, silence. I walked to the kitchen window and watched him. He pulled out his phone, jabbing at the screen. He paced a short, tight circle on the driveway, his free hand gesturing in frustration. He was solving his problem, just as I had said he would. I picked up my suitcase, placed my purse on my shoulder, and collected my keys. I did one final walkthrough of the house. It was clean, orderly, empty. I had already arranged for a neighbor to collect the mail and water the plants. I left no note for Marcus. As I backed my car out of the garage, I saw him still standing by his vehicle, talking animatedly into his phone. He saw me. He lowered the phone and stared, his mouth slightly open. I did not wave. I did not stop. I turned the wheel and drove down the street, past his stranded car, past the life where I was an optional feature, a utility to be summoned or dismissed. The morning sun was bright. The road ahead was clear. For the first time in a very long time, the quiet in the car was not an absence. It was a space, and it belonged entirely to me. The cottage was exactly as advertised, small, clean, and quiet. It sat at the end of a gravel lane, separated from the main house by a screen of mature lilac bushes. The key was under a painted rock, as the owner had instructed. I carried my single suitcase inside. The space was one open room with a kitchenette along one wall, a sitting area with a worn but comfortable-looking armchair, and a door leading to a small bedroom and bathroom. The walls were white, the floors polished wood. It held no memories. It held no expectations. I placed my suitcase on the bed and unzipped it. The act of hanging my clothes in the empty closet, of arranging my toothbrush on the sink, of placing my single novel on the side table, was methodical and calm. I was not running away. I was moving in. My first task was the phone. I had purchased a new prepaid handset 2 days after the party, a transaction that felt both clandestine and empowering. Now, sitting at the small wooden table by the window, I powered it on. The screen glowed, blank and anonymous. I transferred the necessary contacts from my old phone with careful deliberation. Ruth, 2 other close friends, my doctor, my financial advisor. I did not transfer Marcus. I did not transfer Chloe. I then took my old phone, the one Marcus had called 100 times. I composed a single group text message to the carefully curated list of contacts I was keeping. Hello all. I have changed my number for personal reasons. This is my new contact information. I am well and will be in touch soon. Best, Vivian. I sent it. I did not include an explanation. I then powered down the old phone and placed it in the kitchen drawer. It was now just a piece of plastic and glass. Its purpose was severed. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not the quiet of my empty house, which was always waiting to be filled. This was a different quality of silence, self-contained and complete. There was no potential for a ringing tone, for a vibrating alert, for the chime of a text that would carry a demand wrapped in a familiar name. The air itself seemed stiller. I slept for 12 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep that felt like a physical reset. When I woke, the morning light was filtering through the sheer curtains of the bedroom window, casting a soft, neutral glow on the unfamiliar walls. For a moment, I lay still, waiting for the usual mental list of the day's obligations to assemble itself. Marcus's schedule, grocery needs, household chores. The list did not come. The space remained blank. I got up and walked into the main room. I filled the kettle at the small sink and set it on the stove. I measured 1 precise scoop of coffee grounds into the French press, a ritual I had performed thousands of times, but never like this. The kettle whistled. I poured the water, watching the grounds swirl and bloom. I waited 4 minutes, then pressed the plunger down with steady, even pressure. I poured the coffee into a single mug, a plain white one provided with the cottage. I did not add sugar. I carried it to the table by the window and sat down. I looked out at the backyard. There was a bird feeder, empty, and a patch of untended garden. A squirrel scampered along a fence post. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter, and perfect. I had made it exactly how I liked it, for no one's approval, to meet no one's schedule but my own. The simplicity of the act was profound. This coffee was not a prelude to a day of service. It was the entire point. The loneliness arrived then, not as a sharp pain, but as a hollow, expanding awareness. It was the physical sense of being alone in a space where no one knew I was. There was no one to talk to, no one to check on me. The weight of my own company was immense. I felt it in my chest, a cool, heavy emptiness. I let myself feel it. I did not fight it with music or television. I sat with it and drank my coffee. This, I understood, was the cost. This hollow space was the price of my self-respect. I had traded the warmth of a toxic connection for the stark clarity of solitude. The silence was no longer just an absence of noise. It was the sound of my own choices. After the coffee was finished, I washed the mug. I made the bed. I wrote a check for the first month's rent and sealed it in an envelope to mail to the landlord. These small, administrative actions anchored me. They were threads I was using to weave a new, quiet life. Later, I took a walk. I did not know the neighborhood. I turned left without a destination. I passed other houses, saw other people through windows, living their own contained lives. I was a ghost here, unobserved and unneeded. There was a peculiar freedom in it. When I returned to the cottage, the silence welcomed me back. It was no longer frightening. It was mine. I had claimed it. The new phone on the table did not ring. I had not given the number to the one person who would have called with a crisis, a demand, or a rehearsed apology designed to restore the old order. That evening, I made a simple dinner for one. I ate it at the small table. The only sound was the scrape of my fork on the plate. It was the most honest meal I had eaten in years. I was nourishing only myself. The world had not ended. Marcus had solved his car problem, or he had not. It was no longer my concern. My concern was the quiet, the coffee, the empty bird feeder outside the window. It was a very small world. For now, it was exactly enough. The silence held for 3 days. It was a clean, empty space I began to inhabit with a sort of clinical curiosity. I established a routine: coffee at the window, a morning walk, reading in the armchair, simple meals. I was an observer of my own life, noting the absence of pressure with the same detachment I once used to inventory library shelves. On the 4th morning, I checked the email account I had kept for practical matters. Among the newsletters and receipts was a message from Chloe. The subject line was, "Call Marcus." The body of the email was brief and carefully phrased. "Hi, Vivian. Hope you're okay. Marcus has been trying to reach you. Your number isn't working. He's pretty worried. Can you give him a call when you get this? Thanks, Chloe." I read it twice. The tone was that of a neutral intermediary, a professional assistant handling a minor scheduling conflict. There was no mention of the party, of the photo, of the morning on my porch. It was a simple technical request. "Your communication line is down. Please restore it." I closed the email without replying. I did not delete it. I let it sit in the inbox, a data point. That afternoon, I retrieved my old phone from the kitchen drawer. I powered it on. The screen illuminated, and after a moment, a cascade of notifications flooded in. Missed call alerts, text message previews, voicemail icons. The digital evidence of a world trying to re-establish contact. The battery was at 18%. I took the phone, my coat, and walked to the small park I had found at the end of the lane. The park had a pond, a few benches, and a pair of ducks methodically paddling in circles. I sat on a cold wooden bench, the old phone heavy in my hand. I opened the voicemail interface. There were 17 new messages. I plugged in my headphones, pressed play on the first one, and watched the ducks. Message 1 left the evening of my departure. Marcus's voice was tinged with exasperation. "Mom, hey, look, about today I got the car towed. It was the alternator, cost a fortune. Anyway, call me back. We need to talk about whatever this is. You really overreacted." A beep marked the end. Message 2 later that night. His tone was more confused. "It's me again. Are you really not home? I drove by. The house is dark. Your car gone. Where are you? Call me." Message 3 the next morning. A note of irritation had returned. "Okay, now I'm getting annoyed. I've called 10 times. Chloe tried you too. Your phone goes straight to voicemail. Is it broken? Did you change your number? Why would you do that? This is childish." Message 4 that afternoon. The first trace of something else. Not concern for me, but frustration at an obstacle. "I had to borrow Chloe's car to get to work. This is a huge inconvenience. I need to be able to reach you. What if there's an emergency? You need to call me back today." The messages continued, a chronological map of his escalating bewilderment. The central theme was his inconvenience. My absence was a problem to be solved, a malfunction in his support system. There was no inquiry into my state of mind, no reflection on his actions, only a growing insistence that I rectify the disruption. Message 9 was from Chloe. Her voice was hesitant, artificially bright. "Hi, Vivian, it's Chloe, just, checking in. Marcus is really worried. We both are. Please call one of us. Just let us know you're safe, okay? Thanks." It sounded like a script. Message 12 from Marcus 2 days later. The anger was clearer, less restrained. I don't understand what you want from me. I said I was sorry. What else am I supposed to do? You're acting like I committed a crime. It was a joke. Everyone's moved on except you. You're being ridiculous and selfish. The word asterisk selfish hung in the air. I watched a duck dip its head beneath the water. The final messages shifted in tone again. The anger bled into a strained, bewildered pleading. Message 15. Mom, please, I don't get it. Where are you? Are you at Ruth's? I called her. She wouldn't tell me anything. She said to respect your space. What does that mean? This is my mother we're talking about. Message 16, his voice lower, slower. I went by the house again. The neighbor said you asked her to get the mail. She wouldn't say more. You planned this. You actually planned to just disappear. Why? Because of a photo. There was a long pause on the recording, just the sound of his breathing. Call me. The last message was from earlier this morning. The frustration was gone, replaced by a hollow, tired confusion. It's me. I got your new number from Ruth. I had to convince her. She only gave it to me because I said it was a real emergency. I'm not going to call it. I want you to know I have it. I want you to know I'm trying. Just call me or text me something. The recording ended. The voicemail system informed me I had no more new messages. I sat for a while, the headphones silencing the world. The ducks had moved on to the far side of the pond. I analyzed the messages not with emotion, but as a librarian would analyze a series of historical documents. They revealed a clear narrative: confusion, irritation, anger, bargaining, and finally, a dawning, uncomfortable recognition that the rules had permanently changed. Not once had he asked if I was hurt. He had only stated that I was overreacting. I selected the option to delete all saved messages. A prompt asked for confirmation. I pressed yes. The screen updated. No saved messages. I then powered down the old phone for what I knew would be the last time. I removed the SIM card, bent it between my fingers until the plastic casing cracked, and dropped the pieces into a public trash bin by the bench. The phone itself I would dispose of elsewhere. The new phone, my phone, was in my pocket. It had not rung. He said he had the number but would not call it. That was his choice. The line, should he decide to use it, was now entirely on my terms. He would be calling a number I controlled, not one that connected to the woman who would always answer. I stood up from the bench. The ducks took flight, their wings beating a sudden, frantic rhythm against the still air before they settled again further away. I walked back to the cottage. The test was over. I had listened. I had not responded. My resolve, far from breaking, had solidified into something quiet and immovable. The first skirmish was won not by fighting, but by refusing to enter the battlefield he had chosen. The disposal of the phone was a technical task. I drove to an electronics recycling bin across town and dropped the handset into the appropriate slot. It was a final, physical severance. The cottage felt different when I returned. It was no longer just a hiding place. It was a base of operations. The silence was no longer something to endure, but a resource. A week of solitary walks and silent meals clarified a new need. The hollow space inside me had stabilized, but it was still hollow. I needed input that was not my own thoughts, connection that carried no history of obligation. I remembered passing a sign for Laurel Grove Independent Living during one of my drives. It had not registered then. Now it presented itself as a possibility. I did not go with the intention of moving. I went to observe. The building was a low, modern complex with well-kept gardens. The front doors were automatic. I stepped into a bright, spacious lobby. The air was warm and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and coffee. To the right was a large common room. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto clusters of comfortable chairs and tables. A group of 4 women sat around a card table by the far window. I stood near the entrance, feeling conspicuously young. I was assessing the exit routes when a voice cut through the quiet hum of conversation. You look lost, dear, or like you're casing the joint for valuables. We keep the good silver under lock and key. I turned. A woman with closely cropped silver hair and sharp, observant eyes was sitting in a wingback chair near a bookshelf. She held a paperback open on her lap, but her attention was fully on me. She wore a bright purple sweater. I'm just looking. I said, my standard response. Aren't we all, she replied, marking her page with a flap of the dust jacket and closing the book. At what? Peace and quiet? They have plenty. Boredom? They have that too. If you're not careful, I'm a leaner. Vivian. Vivian, are you scouting for a parent? Most people who hover in the doorway like that are. No, I said, and the word felt definitive. For myself, just considering options. Elinor's eyes widened slightly, then crinkled at the corners. Is that so? Well, you're a few decades early for the full-time package, but the coffee is free and the company is selectively excellent. That bunch over there, she nodded toward the card table, are about to be a player short for bridge. Mildred has a podiatry appointment. They'll recruit you if you stand there looking available for much longer. I don't play bridge, I said. Even better, they love a novice. Gives them a chance to be magnificently superior. Come on. She stood up with a fluidity that belied her age. I'll introduce you. If you hate it, you can pretend to get a phone call. Everyone does. It was not an invitation so much as a gentle command. I found myself following her across the room. The four women at the table looked up as we approached. Their faces were a map of lines and intelligence. Ladies, this is Vivian. She's considering her future and has foolishly wandered into the lion's den. She does not play bridge. Mildred's spot is open. A woman with vibrant red glasses smiled. We all started not knowing. Sit, sit. Elinor, you deal. You have the sneaky hands. Elinor pulled out the vacant chair for me. I sat. She took the seat opposite and began to shuffle the deck with a practiced, fluid motion. The cards made a crisp, rhythmic sound. She explained the basic principles as she dealt, trump suits, taking tricks, bidding. Her explanation was clear, without condescension. The first few hands were a confusion of misplayed cards and gentle corrections. You might want to hold on to that queen, dear, one of the women, Grace, would say. Or, you let Elinor steal that one. She's a pirate. But as the game progressed, something happened. The focus required to follow the rules, to remember what had been played, to try and strategize, pushed all other thoughts from my mind. There was no past here, no Marcus, no birthday cake. There was only the green felt of the table, the pattern of the cards in my hand, the sequence of play. It was a complex, silent puzzle. And there was laughter. Not at me, but at Elinor's dry commentary, at Grace's dramatic sighs when a trick was lost, at their own inside jokes about each other's playing styles. It was easy laughter, unburdened. During a pause while Grace searched for her dropped card, Elinor looked at me. You're a librarian, aren't you? I was taken aback. How did you know? You have the look, patient, observant, you categorize things, and you're starting to remember which cards have been played. That's a librarian's mind, useless for most things, excellent for bridge and revenge. She said the last word lightly, almost offhand, but her eyes held mine for a fraction of a second too long. I did not confirm or deny. I simply picked up my new hand. When the game ended an hour later, my mind felt strangely tired and clear. The women all had names, Grace, Rose, Carol. They patted my shoulder as they got up. You come back next week, Vivian. You're a quick study. Elinor stayed at the table, gathering the cards into a neat stack. So, painful or passable? Passable, I admitted. Thank you for the instruction. You're welcome. It's a good game. It teaches you that what you hold in your hand is only part of the story. The power is in what you remember about what's already been laid on the table. She tapped the deck. You should come to the book club on Thursday. We're reading a mystery. Plenty of revenge in those. I stood. I'll consider it. We meet at 2. No pressure. She smiled, a genuine, uncomplicated expression. It's good to have new blood, even if it's a few decades young. I walked back through the lobby. The light seemed brighter. The quiet of the common room was no longer the quiet of isolation, but of contained activity, of lives being lived side by side. I had not shared my story. I had not unburdened myself. I had simply played cards. I had been a novice, a student, a temporary fourth for a bridge game. It was the most honest social interaction I had experienced in years. Driving back to the cottage, I did not feel the heavy loneliness. I felt a faint, unfamiliar thread of anticipation. Thursday was 2 days away, a book club. I had not read a book for pleasure in a long time. I stopped at a bookstore on the way home. I found the mystery they were reading. I bought it. That night, I did not sit by the window in silence. I sat in the armchair and opened the book. The quiet of the cottage was now the quiet of concentration. The hollow space inside me was not gone, but for the first time, I could see that it might not remain empty forever. It could be filled with new things: the strategy of a game, the plot of a novel, the sharp wit of a woman in a purple sweater. These were threads of a different color. I began to read. The book club was not what I expected. Elinor presided over the group of 8 women with the sharp wit of a college professor and the fairness of a judge. The discussion of the mystery novel was spirited, analytical, and surprisingly deep. I spoke twice, offering observations about the protagonist's motives. My comments were met with thoughtful nods, not interruption. It was a conversation, not a competition for airtime. I left with a list of book recommendations and an invitation to next month's meeting. The experience had a clarifying effect. The world at Laurel Grove operated on a set of implicit rules: respect, reciprocity, the freedom to participate or observe without pressure. It was a society, small and self-contained, that functioned properly. It made the disarray I had left behind seem not just painful, but unnecessary. I had tolerated a broken system for too long. The following Monday, I put on a tailored blouse and a pair of trousers. I gathered my financial documents into a leather portfolio. My actions were not fueled by anger, but by the same methodical focus I used to apply to cataloging a new library acquisition. This was an administrative task, long overdue. My first stop was the bank where Marcus and I held a joint savings account. It had been opened years ago, a family emergency fund. Over time, it had subtly transformed into a supplement for Marcus's temporary cash flow issues: a new suit for an interview, a security deposit, the deductible for his car repair. I had never minded. Now I minded the connection. The bank was cool and quiet. I requested a withdrawal of the entire balance, which was a modest $4,000. The teller, a young man with efficient hands, processed the transaction. He printed the receipt. "Will the other account holder be notified?" he asked, his tone routine. "That is not necessary," I said. I did not elaborate. I placed the receipt in my portfolio. The account, now empty, would remain open technically, but it was a hollow shell. A joint account with $0 is no longer a joint account. It is just a line on a statement. Next, I visited my own bank, where I held my primary accounts. I sat with a banking officer, a woman named Linda around my age. I requested the forms to remove a beneficiary. The process was straightforward. I filled out the paperwork, naming a charitable foundation I supported in place of the previous beneficiary, Marcus Harper. I signed with a steady hand. Linda stamped the forms. "The changes will be effective immediately," she said. "Thank you," I replied. My final appointment was at 2 o'clock. The law office of Henderson and Associates occupied a quiet suite in a brick building downtown. I was early. I sat in the waiting room, my portfolio on my lap, and observed the tasteful decor. It spoke of stability and discretion. "Ms. Harper, Mr. Henderson will see you now." The lawyer, a man in his 60s with a calm demeanor, greeted me and gestured to a chair opposite his broad, tidy desk. "You indicated this was regarding estate planning," he said. "Yes, I wish to update my will, completely." He nodded, opening a fresh notepad. "A prudent decision. Life circumstances change. Do you have a copy of your current will?" I produced it from my portfolio. It was a simple document, drafted years ago when Marcus was a teenager. It left everything to him, with my sister as executor. Mr. Henderson skimmed it. "And what are the changes you'd like to make?" "I wish to remove my son, Marcus Harper, as both primary beneficiary and executor. I would like to name new beneficiaries and a new executor." He looked up, his expression professionally neutral. "I see. Are you certain? This is a significant revision." "I am certain." Asked no personal questions. He simply began outlining the legal requirements. We discussed assets: the house, my investment accounts, my personal effects. We discussed beneficiaries: I divided the bulk of my estate between the same charitable foundation and a scholarship fund for library sciences students. A smaller portion was designated for my sister. Specific personal items, my mother's jewelry, my book collection, I left to friends, including Ruth. I named Ruth as my executor. You should formalize this with a letter of instructions for your executor, detailing your wishes for personal items not listed here, he advised. It is not legally binding, but it is helpful. I will do that, I said. He drafted the language. He read sections aloud to me. The phrasing was dry and legalistic. I hereby revoke all former wills and codicils. I give, devise, and bequeath my life's work, distilled into paragraphs of precise terminology. It felt clean, final. The final step will be signing with 2 witnesses who are not beneficiaries. My assistant and paralegal can serve that function, he said. Let's do it now, please. He called them in. 2 professional women entered. Mr. Henderson explained the document. I signed my name on the indicated lines. The witnesses signed. The paralegal applied a notary stamp. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. You will receive a copy in the mail. The original will remain in our vault here as you requested, Mr. Henderson said, standing to shake my hand. It was a pleasure to assist you, Ms. Harper. Please don't hesitate to contact us if your circumstances change again. I don't expect them to, I said. I left the office, the leather portfolio feeling lighter. The autumn air was crisp. I walked to my car, not with a sense of victory, but with a sense of order restored. I had audited the emotional and material ledger of my life. I had found discrepancies. I had corrected them. The revenge, as they might call it, was not dramatic. It was administrative. It was the quiet click of a lock, the definitive stroke of a pen, the zero balance on a statement. It was the act of consciously, deliberately, choosing where my energy and resources would go. They would no longer flow, by default or obligation, toward someone who saw me as a utility. I drove past the park with the pond. I did not stop. I went to the grocery store and bought ingredients for a proper meal. That evening, as I cooked, I thought about the letter of instructions I would write. I would leave my favorite reading lamp to Alina. She would appreciate a good lamp. The thought did not make me sad. It felt appropriate. I was building a new architecture for my life, 1 room at a time. Today, I had laid a very solid, very quiet cornerstone. The new will and the closed accounts created a kind of internal stillness. The legal and financial actions were not about inflicting harm, but about establishing a true boundary, one that existed on paper and in reality. I slept more soundly. My mornings at the cottage felt less like an interlude and more like a permanent state. My social calendar, a term that would have made me smile before, now had actual entries. Bridge every Tuesday at Laurel Grove. A film screening with the book club on Friday. Alina had taken to calling me midweek, not for any urgent reason, but to discuss an article she'd read or to recommend a bakery. Our conversations were easy, free of subtext. She asked for nothing. It was after one of these bridge games that the group decided to go for coffee. The usual spot was a cafe called the Daily Grind, a few blocks away. It was a cozy place with mismatched armchairs and the rich smell of roasted beans. We claimed a large table by the front window, the afternoon sun warming our backs. Grace was telling a story about her granddaughter's disastrous attempt at baking, her hands fluttering dramatically. Rose interjected with dry corrections. Alina sipped her espresso, her eyes sparkling with amusement. I was listening, my elbow on the table, my chin resting in my hand. I had just made a comment about the importance of precise measurements, drawing on my own kitchen experience. Rose had retorted that life needed more improvisation. The debate was silly and delightful. Grace made a final, exaggerated plea for sympathy, and the absurdity of it struck me. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, loud and unguarded, the kind that makes you lean back in your chair. I threw my head back slightly, the tension I had carried for years in my shoulders completely absent. I was simply a woman laughing with friends. It was at that exact moment, as I was leaning back, my face turned toward the window, that I saw him. Marcus was on the sidewalk about 10 feet away. He was frozen mid-stride, staring directly at me through the glass. He wore a dark coat, his hands shoved in his pockets. His expression was one of pure, uncomprehending shock. He looked like he had seen a ghost, but not a frightening one, a ghost who was having a much better time than the living. Our eyes locked for a full 3 seconds. The laughter died on my lips, not from distress, but from a shift in focus. I registered the details, the pallor of his skin, the new lines around his eyes, the way his mouth had fallen slightly open. He looked thinner. He looked lost. Alina followed my gaze. "Do you know that young man?" she asked quietly. "He looks like he's seen a vision." "That's my son," I said, my voice calm. I did not look away from him. A flicker of understanding passed over Alina's face. She did not say she was sorry. She simply nodded once, a sharp, acknowledging dip of her chin. Marcus took an involuntary step forward, then stopped, as if an invisible barrier prevented him from approaching the cafe door. His eyes scanned our table, the cheerful clutter of cups and saucers, the comfortable postures of my friends, my own relaxed position. He was seeing evidence of a life, a full and vibrant one, operating entirely without his knowledge or presence. Grace, unaware of the silent drama at the window, said, "So, Vivian, are you going to the botanical garden tour next week? They say the orchids are spectacular." I turned my head away from Marcus, breaking the connection. I looked at Grace. I hadn't decided. Is it a guided tour? "Yes, with a terribly handsome horticulturist, according to Rose," Grace said, winking. Rose scoffed. I said, knowledgeable. "Your hearing is as selective as your bridge playing." The conversation flowed around me again. I participated, asking about the tour time. But I was acutely aware of the figure on the other side of the glass. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him finally move. He didn't come in. He didn't knock on the window. He took a slow, stumbling step backward, then turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He disappeared down the street. The moment passed. The coffee was still warm. The story about the horticulturist continued. I felt a strange, quiet sensation. It wasn't pleasure at his pain. It was validation. He had been searching for a heartbroken woman, a mother pinning for her child. He had found, instead, a woman leaning back in a cafe chair, laughing so hard she had to wipe a tear from her eye. He had witnessed my happiness. It was a factual occurrence, and now it was a piece of knowledge he possessed. "He's gone," Alina stated, not as a question. "Yes," I said. "Good," she replied and took a deliberate sip of her coffee. "More scone." I accepted a piece of the scone. The buttery, crumbly texture was real. The warmth of the sun through the window was real. The company at the table was real. The figure receding down the cold sidewalk was already becoming less substantial, a shadow from another life. He had seen what he needed to see. The consequence of his choice was no longer an abstract concept of silence. It was the vivid, audible proof of my contentment without him. The revenge, I thought, was not in my actions, but in his observation. Let him see the ghost, happy and whole. Let him carry that image with him. It would be far heavier than any angry word I could have thrown. The sight of Marcus receding down the sidewalk was like watching a page turn. The conversation at the table resumed, and after a few minutes, so did my participation. We finished our coffee. We split the check with exact change. We walked out into the afternoon, the bell on the cafe door jingling behind us. Alina fell into step beside me as we walked toward the parking lot. "That was him," she stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes." He looked unwell. I noticed. She was silent for a few paces. "Are you going to speak to him?" "No," I said. The answer was immediate and absolute. He saw what he needed to see. Any conversation now would be on his terms to alleviate his discomfort. I have no interest in that. Alina nodded. "A clean break is a kind of mercy. For you anyway. For him, it's a lesson, painful but necessary." She unlocked her car, a sensible sedan. "The letter is still a good idea. It provides a formal period to the sentence." I had mentioned the concept of a letter to her once, in the abstract. She had approved of the method. "I think so too," I said. "It's time." That evening, in the quiet of the cottage, I took out a sheet of my best stationery and a pen with black ink. I did not write a draft. I knew precisely what needed to be said. The words formed in my mind with the clarity of a legal document. I began to write, my handwriting steady and even. Marcus asterisk. This letter is to inform you that I am well. I have established a new residence and am building a peaceful life for myself. The actions I have taken since my birthday, changing my contact information, moving, separating our finances, updating my will, were deliberate and are permanent. They are not punishments, but the logical consequences of your decision to publicly exclude me from your family unit. I have accepted that definition. I have moved on. I will initiate any future contact on my own terms should I ever see a reason to do so. For any necessary legal or financial communication, please contact my attorney, Mr. Robert Henderson, whose card is enclosed. Do not attempt to contact me through friends or other channels. They have been instructed not to intervene. I wish you no ill will. I simply wish for the peace I have created to remain undisturbed. Vivian Harper. I read it over twice. It was cold. It was clean. It offered no opening for debate, no hook for an apology, no emotional ledge for him to grasp. It stated facts, her well-being, her actions, her terms. It removed him from the equation of her life with bureaucratic finality. I signed my full name. I found a plain white envelope. I addressed it to Marcus at his apartment. I did not use Mr. or any other title, just his name and address. I placed the single sheet of stationery inside, along with one of Mr. Henderson's business cards. I sealed the envelope. The next morning, I drove to the main post office. It was a large, impersonal building with long counters and the faint smell of paper and glue. I took a number and waited on a hard plastic chair until it was called. I approached the clerk, a woman with a tired but efficient demeanor. I need to send this certified mail with a return receipt requested, I said, sliding the envelope across the counter. She took it, typed the address into her system, and printed the required green and white forms. She affixed the certified mail sticker to the envelope with its unique tracking number. She handed me the receipt, a small slip of paper with the same number. You can track it online, she said. The return receipt will be mailed back to you when he signs for it. Thank you, I said. I paid the fee. I watched as she tossed the envelope into a large bin behind her, already full of other letters and packages. It disappeared among them, just another piece of official business. That was all it was. This was not a dramatic gesture flung in anger. It was a notification, a change of address form for a relationship. I left the post office. The autumn sun was bright. I stood on the steps for a moment, the paper receipt in my hand. This small slip was proof that I had done it. I had drawn the line, not in sand, but in ink and postal regulations. He would have to sign for it. He would have to physically accept this piece of paper that contained his new reality. I did not feel triumphant. I felt a profound, deep calm. The internal noise that had plagued me since the party, the grief, the anger, the incessant questioning of my own worth, had finally gone silent. The letter was not for him, not really. It was for me. It was the final act in a series of acts that redefined who I was. I was no longer Marcus's mother on call. I was Vivian Harper, a woman who had stated her position and would now defend its borders. I got into my car and placed the postal receipt in the glove compartment. I would not track the letter. I did not need to. I knew it would reach him. The evidence of its delivery would arrive at the cottage in due time. That was enough. Driving home, I thought about the word closure. People use it to describe a feeling. I now understood it as an action, closing an account, closing a will, closing a door, sending a certified letter. Each act was a deliberate physical movement that shut down one possibility and opened up space for another. My life was no longer a room cluttered with the artifacts of a one-sided relationship. It was the clean, quiet cottage. It was the bridge table. It was the book club. It was a future I would design alone. The revenge was complete. It had never been about hurting him. It had been about reclaiming myself. And as I turned onto the gravel lane leading to my temporary home, I knew with absolute certainty that I had succeeded. The woman in the burgundy blouse had been erased. The woman driving this car was someone else entirely, and she was finally, completely free. The certified letter was received. The small green return receipt card arrived in my mailbox a week later, bearing a signature I recognized as Marcus. though it was scribbled with a haste that suggested agitation. I filed it away with my other important papers. The line was now officially drawn and acknowledged. I did not think about what happened after he opened it. That was his territory. My life continued its new, quiet rhythm. I had even begun to look at small apartments for a more permanent move after the cottage lease ended. The future was no longer a frightening blank, but a series of practical decisions. It was on a Tuesday afternoon after bridge that I saw the unfamiliar car turn onto the gravel lane. It was a compact, silver sedan, sleek and modern. It pulled up behind my car and stopped. I stood at the kitchen window, waiting. The driver's door opened, and Chloe stepped out. She looked toward the cottage, smoothed her coat, and then walked toward the front door. Her steps were hesitant. I watched her for a moment, then went to open the door before she could knock. I did not want the sound to violate the quiet. She stopped short on the small porch, her hand half raised. "Vivian, hi." "Chloe," I said. I did not step aside. "This is a surprise." "I know, I'm sorry to just show up. Can we talk for a minute?" Her eyes were darting past me, taking in the small space behind me. "You may come in," I said, and finally moved back. I led her to the main room. "Please sit." She perched on the edge of the armchair, her purse clutched on her lap. I took the wooden chair from the table. The distance between us was exact. "Would you like some water?" I asked. No, thank you." She took a breath. "I got your address from Ruth. I had to promise I wouldn't cause a scene. She was very protective." "Ruth is a good friend," I said. "Yes." Chloe looked down at her hands, then around the room again. "This is nice, cozy. It serves its purpose." Silence stretched. She was here to talk, so she would have to find the words. I was not going to help her. "Marcus got your letter," she finally blurted out. I nodded. The postal service confirmed that. He didn't take it well." She looked up at me, her expression searching for sympathy. "He's a mess, Vivian, a real mess. He doesn't go out. He barely goes to work. He just sits in the apartment and stares at the wall, or he reads that letter over and over. He's truly sorry. He understands now, I think, what he did." I listened. I said nothing. "He wants to fix it. He wants to make it right, but he doesn't know how. The letter, it was so final." Her voice wavered slightly. "I've never seen him like this." "I see," I said. My calmness seemed to unnerve her more than anger would have. "Aren't you worried about him? He's your son." "He is an adult," I replied. "His emotional state is his responsibility to manage, just as his car repairs are. I am no longer his emotional manager." She flinched at the cold precision of the statement. "It wasn't all his fault," she said, her voice dropping. "At the party, I laughed too. I went along with it. I should have said something. I knew it was wrong as soon as the words were out of his mouth, but I just laughed. I'm sorry for that." I considered her apology. It was specific. It acknowledged a concrete action. It was better than Marcus's vague, "I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt." "Thank you for the apology," I said. "I accept it." She seemed to brighten for a second, as if this was an opening. "So maybe there's a way forward. If he apologized properly, he would. He just needs a chance." I shook my head once. "There is no way forward, Chloe. The letter was not an opening for negotiation. It was a statement of fact. My life has moved on. I have accepted the situation he created." "But he's suffering," she insisted, a pleading note entering her voice. "That is unfortunate," I said, "but it is not my concern. My concern is my own peace, which I now have." She stared at me, truly seeing the woman in front of her for the first time. The Vivian she knew would have been distraught at the news of Marcus's suffering. This Vivian was simply stating a logistical reality. The transformation was complete, and it was clearly terrifying to her. "You've really changed," she whispered. "I have." "What should I tell him?" "You can tell him I listen to you. You can tell him I am well. You can tell him nothing will change. The choice is yours." She looked defeated. The power dynamic had permanently shifted, and she was standing on the weaker side. She had come as an envoy from a kingdom that no longer held any sway here. "I think I should go," she said, standing up abruptly. I stood as well. I walked her to the door. The autumn air was cool. Thank you for coming, Chloe. Drive safely. She turned on the porch. He loves you, in his way. I know, I said, but his way was not enough. Goodbye. I closed the door. I watched through the window as she walked quickly to her car, got in, and reversed down the lane. The gravel spat under her tires. I returned to the kitchen. The encounter had lasted less than 15 minutes. I felt no upheaval. If anything, I felt a deeper consolidation of my position. Chloe's visit had provided external confirmation. Marcus was indeed experiencing the consequences. Chloe was uneasy. The old world was fraying. I made a cup of tea. I sat by the window. The silence reclaimed the space, richer now. The unlikely messenger had come and gone. She had delivered her report, and I had delivered my verdict. Nothing had changed. That was the point. The revenge was not in his suffering. It was in my unwavering peace in the face of it. He could be a mess. She could be uneasy. I was having tea by the window in a quiet cottage, my life my own. The balance was irrevocably tipped, and I felt not an ounce of guilt. I felt only the solid, satisfying weight of a boundary well defended. Chloe's visit receded into the past, another confirmed data point in the new geography of my life. The seasons turned definitively toward winter. I signed a lease on a small, bright apartment a short drive from Laurel Grove, with a move-in date after the new year. The future was no longer an abstract concept. It was a set of measurements for curtains, a list of which kitchen items I would keep. Elinor's birthday arrived on a crisp Saturday in late November. She had insisted on no fuss, which of course guaranteed that her friends would create a fuss. Grace organized a potluck lunch in the Laurel Grove community room. I brought a savory tart, something I had enjoyed making in my old life, but rarely had an occasion to share. The room was bustling. Streamers in Elinor's favorite purple were taped to the walls. A long table was laden with dishes. The air was warm with the smell of food and the sound of overlapping conversations. Elinor held court in a large chair, wearing a vibrant scarf, accepting tributes and deflecting sentimental speeches with dry humor. After we ate, Grace clinked a spoon against her glass. All right, everyone, time for the official birthday portrait, all of us. Gather round. There was a shuffling of chairs, a rearranging of bodies. Someone produced a digital camera and set it on a tripod. We clustered behind Elinor's chair, a group of a dozen women, all in various stages of life after 60, with me as the noticeable junior member. Vivian, you get in the middle next to Elinor, Grace directed, pointing. You're part of the inner circle now. Oh, I can stand at the end, I said, the old reflex of making myself small asserting itself for a fleeting second. Nonsense, Elinor said without looking back. She reached behind her and grabbed my wrist, pulling me firmly to the spot directly beside her chair. Center frame, you've earned it. There was a murmur of agreement from the others. I felt hands on my shoulders, gentle pats on my back. I was ushered into the space. I stood there, flanked by Rose and Grace, my hand resting on the back of Elinor's chair. The camera's timer was set. A small red light began to blink. Everyone smile. No scowling, Elinor, I see you, Grace called out. I looked at the camera lens. I thought of the last family photo, the one where I had been the photographer, the empty chair. I thought of the cold patio, the taste of bland cake. I felt the warm pressure of the hands on my shoulders now. I heard Elinor's chuckle beside me. I saw the faces around me, expectant and cheerful. The smile that came to my face was not performed. It was not a hostess's smile. It started deep within, a simple, uncomplicated recognition of belonging. It filled my eyes, eased the lines on my forehead, and lifted my cheeks. I did not force it. I simply allowed it to be there. The camera clicked. The red light stopped blinking. Perfect, Grace declared. Let's take 2 more just in case. We took several. In each one, my smile remained, natural and steady. Afterward, there was cake. Elinor made a short, witty speech that thanked us for the cholesterol. The party began to wind down. Later that evening, back at the cottage, Grace emailed the photos. I scrolled through them. There we were, a vibrant, chaotic group. In every picture, I was in the center. My expression was one of open, unguarded joy. I looked at myself. I looked years younger. I looked free. I selected the clearest photo. I uploaded it to the social media account I rarely used, the one I had kept dormant for years. I wrote a simple caption, the truth as I now knew it. Finding joy where you are planted. Grateful for this chosen family on a dear friend's birthday. I tagged no one. I posted it. It was not a message for him. It was a statement for myself, a public affirmation of my new reality. But I understood the modern world. I knew it would find its way to him. The following days were quiet. My new phone did not ring. No desperate emails arrived. The silence from his direction was now complete, and it felt different from the silence of his initial confusion. This silence felt like acknowledgement. A week later, Ruth called me. Her voice was careful. I saw your photo online, Vivian. You look wonderful, truly happy. I am, I said. I'm glad. She paused. Marcus saw it too. Chloe mentioned it to me. She said he just sat and looked at it for a long time. He didn't say anything. Then he closed the laptop. I listened. I see. She said he looked resigned. Not angry, just finally understanding. That's good, I said, and I meant it. Understanding was the only gift I could ever offer him now. I moved into my new apartment on a clear, cold day in January. Eleanor, Grace, and Rose helped me unpack my few boxes. We drank tea from mismatched mugs and argued about where to place the bookcase. The photo from Eleanor's birthday was printed and framed. It sat on my new mantle, the first artifact of my new history. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the evening, I think about the woman in the burgundy blouse. I do not miss her. She was a precursor, a necessary version of myself who believed that love meant endless erosion. She had to be erased so that I could be drawn. The revenge is complete. It was not an act of malice, but an act of reconstruction. He told me to get out of the picture, so I did. I stepped out of his frame and into my own. I composed a new scene with a different cast under better lighting. The final, quiet triumph is this. I am no longer waiting for an invitation to belong. I built my own table. I set my own place. And in the photograph that now matters, I am, without question or apology, center frame.